Hi. Let me know if you can't hear me or anything like that. I've got the chat window open off screen here. I'm going to silence my notification. I'm going to close my email. Okay. So yeah, thanks for tuning in for Data Wrangling with OpenRefine. My name is Mike Waugh. I'm the Systems Librarian here at LSU Libraries. My co-presenter, Rachel Chile, Digital Projects Librarian, won't be able to make it today. She her car was rear-ended by a tow truck that was carrying another truck, and it pushed her into another truck. So kind of the definition of what do you say, what people say whenever they don't feel good, you know, like I got run over by a truck. Well, that happened to Rachel 3 times. So she's not feeling too well, and she's okay, but not really in the mood to do a webinar. So we're all hoping she gets better soon. Okay, so I'll carry on. Some of these slides were prepared by Rachel. So I'll try to do them justice, but for the most part, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some of these PowerPoint slides, and then I'll take advantage of the fact that I'm at my desk, and so I'll be able to show you some of these things and demonstrate it real time in the application in OpenRefine. Right? And there's my picture there if you don't know what I look like there. So let's see. There we go. All right. My notes up over here. Okay. So I'll start off with an introduction. What is it? Are there other similar tools? What can it do? And even a little bit about how to install it. Okay, so what is OpenRefine? What the heck is OpenRefine? Well, for those of you, if you're like me, you use spreadsheets a lot. Well, it's more powerful than a spreadsheet. If you dabble in some computer scripting, which I try to do a little bit of, it's more interactive and visual than that. You can see your data in real time, and you'll see that whenever I pull it up a little bit later. And then it's more exploratory and experimental and playful than a database. And you know, that's a hard hurdle to overcome right there, is to be more playful than a database. But as you'll see whenever I bring it up, it can be kind of fun to look at some of this stuff. So now that I've said that, really, what is it? Okay, so just some background information. It was formerly known as Google Refine. Google had acquired a company that had developed the basics of the tool, and Google supported it for a while, but in the past few years, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago, Google released it into the wild, in that they stopped supporting it, but in order for people to keep using it, they released it as open source code. So that means right now it depends on volunteers to support it and keep it going. It kind of stayed in its form for several years, but just recently a new version was released with some bug fixes and a couple extra functions. Nothing too major, but that's just to let you know that it is an actively supported open source tool now. And the good news about that is that it's free for us to use, which in library world is a definite bonus. If you use Excel a lot, you're going to be very familiar with some of the layout and functions that are in it, some of the things that it can do, but it's a lot different. And I hope at the end of this, I would have demonstrated to you what the major differences between OpenRefine and Excel are. So more properly, it's the interactive data transformation tool, which some people call an IDT. So what is that? Well, the definition I found somewhere online in my resources, and I'm going to have a list of resources as the last line here, so you'll be able to refer to them later. IDTs allow for quick and inexpensive operations on large amounts of data within a single integrated interface, even by domain professionals lacking in-depth technical skills. And by that, I think they're specifically referring to me, a librarian who lacks some in-depth technical skills. I'm working on it, getting better, but sometimes I need to do some things, and OpenRefine is a tool to help me do some things whenever I can't hack it in the command line or write a program to do it. All right, so OpenRefine is such a thing. It's a tool for visualizing and manipulating data. So how does it compare to other tools? You compare it to spreadsheets. In spreadsheets, usually you're dealing with cells one at a time. You are mainly entering the data and then performing calculations on data. In OpenRefine, on the other hand, columns are the primary units of interaction. So you're working against huge swaths of data at the same time. And then instead of entering data, usually you're going to be importing it in. So you'll import it, you'll explore it within the tool, you'll transform it, and then usually you'll export it for use in some other sort of tool. How is it different from scripting? Well, you will only see the input and output whenever you script something. I'm starting to dabble in some scripting, and it can be a total black box sometimes. In OpenRefine, though, at each step, you can interact with the data and you can see it as you edit and transform it, which makes it very useful, especially when you're dealing with data that you're not quite sure what it all looks like. Scripting is primarily used for transforming data, put it into another state from one form, take it from one form to another form. I might be taking it from, for scripting, I might take something from one XML format and put it into another XML format. In OpenRefine, though, it's mainly used for understanding your data and then transforming the data in a different sort of way. I'd say while I would use scripting to maybe transform the structure of data, in OpenRefine, I'm usually looking at the data itself. And that might make more sense again whenever I pull it up and we start looking at it. How does it differ from databases? Well, database, you have to put some effort ahead of time to design a schema. You have to think about how tables relate to each other. OpenRefine, no schema is required. It's pretty much like a spreadsheet. In a database, the data can be hidden a lot of times, unless you do some programming to expose the views. In OpenRefine, the data is there and always available, visible. So what can it do? It can import and export data. That's important to realize because it means that it's meant to work with other tools. You use it in addition to your other tools. So for a systems librarian like me, that would be the ILS, that would be MarcEdit, that'd be Excel, that'd be other web services, the Oxygen, different sorts of things like that. Usually you're not going to put something in OpenRefine and keep it there. It's a means to an end, a ways to an end. You can use it to facet data. And if you're familiar with like what faceting means whenever you search, like in our discovery service or something like that, it means you can slice data in different ways. You can slice it in ways that you can analyze it, group them together, look at things together, group them together so that they can be transformed in a similar sort of way. And we'll look at different ways to facet data a little bit later. You can use regular expressions to match and transform data. In OpenRefine language, they call it Google Refine. Remember, it was called Google Refine. what I said before. Google Refine regular expressions, or the short term is GREL, regular expression language. Google regular expression language. What it means. What it means is you can take a string of data and pick out pieces and parts of it to do stuff, to match and transform. Another thing it can do is it has some features, functions in it that can cluster together similar types of data, and we're going to look at that too. And then finally, another really neat thing it can do is it can reconcile data to outside data sets. So what reconciliation means is you could take a web service that's out there, let's say it's like Library of Congress subject headings. You could use that as a web service to match to your data, and then perhaps you can link that data or transform it, link it in such a way that it can be used in some linked open data sort of projects. Okay, so how do you get it? You can just Google OpenRefine or Google Refine if you want. You'll usually end up at the same place, and you'll see a download page there. The latest version is OpenRefine 2.6. There's versions for Windows, Mac, Linux. Also on that same page, you can download some extensions. There's an RDF extension that's pretty useful for our work. Named entity recognition is another one. That's if you need to tease out whether a proper name, such as someone's name or a location, might be in it. There's also some different flavors of OpenRefine that might have some extensions or functions built into it. One is LOD Refine, or Linked Open Data Refine. So if you think you're going to be mainly working with linked open data, that might be a good flavor to try. Another one called Reconciliation and Matching Framework is a good one. Let me show you real quick, if I can pull over the page. I'm hoping you can see that right there. Let me get rid of paper. So this is the download page for OpenRefine. Here you got your Windows 2.6 right here. Very easy to install. Just double click. I would say that you want to install it into a directory that you have full administrative privileges to, which for some libraries can be a problem, library staff. The good thing is that you can install it into your documents, or you can install it onto a thumb drive. It's completely self-contained in the way that you could, if you put it in My Documents or if you put it on the thumb drive, you have everything you would need to run it at that point. Usually not a problem. I've run into problems if I've tried to install it into my program files. This is if I'm doing it on Windows. And here's these other distributions I was talking about. There's that LOD Refine. Here's that Reconciliation and Matching Framework. There's a couple other flavors there. And then here's a list of the extensions. Probably the main one for our purposes would be this RDF extension, but there are a whole host of others, including this named entity recognition. Pull that off screen again so you can see my slides. Okay. So we'll look at some of the functions in OpenRefine: importing, exporting, faceting, which I mentioned before, transforming, clustering, and reconciling. So here are some of the use cases that I've got ready for us. We'll start off with a tough one, analyzing eLibrary search logs. This is just a little project I did about 2 years ago, just looking at what people were searching for in our eLibrary catalog. The data was messy, so it's a good sort of test case for looking at things in OpenRefine. I have another project where we looked at cleaning some controlled vocabulary. This came out of a content DM, the Louisiana Digital Library Collection. This is one of Rachel's examples, but I think I'll be able to walk through it. We'll also look at matching or linking data to an external data source, and then exporting data for reuse. Most of the presentation today we'll spend on the first two examples here, because it's easy enough that we'll be able to do it in real time. These matching, reconciling data, linking data, sometimes can take a long time in OpenRefine, so it doesn't make a good sort of demonstration sort of case. So for these two last examples, I'll rely on the slides mainly, while we'll try to walk through some of the steps on these first two. All right. Okay, so the first one, analyzing e-library search logs. Just a little background for people who might not be systems librarians. Lewis helps us keep these logs of e-library searches. They're stored on a server. So I might take a FTP server and download them. From those logs, they're plain text logs. I can import them into OpenRefine. OpenRefine, the symbol for it is a diamond, as we'll see a little bit later. And then usually after whatever data cleanup I do, then you might put it in Excel for statistical analysis, or if you want to make like charts and things like that. That's generally the way you do it. So as I said before, OpenRefine, usually things don't stay in OpenRefine. You're using it to get your data from one form and then put it into another application afterwards. So I can create a project by importing the data. It can be tab delimited, comma delimited. It can be Excel files. It can be a JSON format, which is a popular format for the web and for computers. It could be XML. It could be RDF. That looks like XML. And you can also use like Google Data documents. So support for other formats can be added whenever you use the extension that I showed you before. And you can import existing projects that have been worked on from a colleague, or if you find one that's online. Okay, so the first thing, hopefully I'll be able to do this in the two-screen mode in a way that won't be too jarring for you to watch. Okay, so the first thing is we're going to import and preview our files. So pull this screen over here. Maybe I'll do that. And then I'll have my other PowerPoint. Nope. No. I won't do that. There. There. Oh, maybe I'll have to exit this view. So I can refer to my slides as I okay. So this is so I've opened up OpenRefine. It actually opens up in the browser. So whenever you have your OpenRefine application, you just double click on the .exe file, and a little window will show up. A little window that kind of looks like that, one of those things. You can ignore it. Just don't close it, because it's things are happening in that little screen. So normally I just keep it minimized and I don't pay any attention to it. And then this opens up in the browser. So you see this is just my normal Google Chrome. It can run in other browsers, but it probably works best if you use Chrome. So here I'm going to create a project. I'm going to choose a file. I have some files already ready to go. I believe this is the one I want right here. Nope, I want this one, weblogs. So this is an Excel file, as you can tell from the extension. It has a good bit of data in it. 28,882 rows. So it's not a small file, but it, as you can tell, it kind of looked at it real quick. So this is like a preview screen. It's showing me what it would look like if it brought it in just with all the kind of default. So it automatically recognized that it was an Excel file and recognized that the first line of that Excel file were my column headings. So they're in bold up here at the top. I have some options if it's not doing what I want it to do. For example, if I didn't want to parse those column headers, I could uncheck that, and that's just it would just ignore the column headers. But of course, I do want them. So they're there. And then if I like all the settings, I just create the project, and it shows up there. Well, that works there. Okay, so now I've got 28,881 rows. These are my weblogs. I'm only seeing 10 of them right now. That's just under the show right here. 50 is usually what I do. I just like to feel like I'm seeing a lot of the data. So what's the first thing I might do to this data? What I'm interested in are these lines. I'm mainly interested in these lines that look like that people had typed something in. So I can see here that in my log, I guess we'll look at it. We've got like a timestamp column that's called login. Most of them say login. Whenever it says login, it looks like it says succeeded. I'm assuming that's some sort of server talk saying, hey, somebody came to your server and did something. But for these ones that aren't logged in, I see that it has this query, this word that says query, and then next to it, something that looks more like a search. Like maybe this one means this was a general keyword search, and those were the subliminal messages with what they typed into it. I don't have any subliminal messages in this presentation quite yet. Then there's some other information over here. This may or may not be useful to me. But I can tell right away that maybe these logins, maybe I don't need that for the purposes of what I'm going to try to do. So you see up here at the top of each one, I have these drop-down arrows. Similar to what you see in Excel, whenever you try to filter, where you can see all of the values that are in that column, that's what this text filter or facet does. This I don't want to filter in this case. I want to facet. So I want to see, when I click on text facet, I'm going to end up seeing every value that is in this login column. So over here on the left, I see login. So this is telling me that I'm faceting on this login column. And I see that there's 3 values that show up again and again. ATS query, UFS query, whatever that means. And then this one called login. Next to it is a number. Next to ATS query, I see 3,190, 14,000 something for login, 11,000 for UFS query. Now, if I choose any one of these, oh, sorry, let me rewind. Right now, it's sorted by the name, ATS, login, UFS, so that's alphabetical order going down. I could also sort by count. When I click on count, then those numbers become sorting mechanisms. So I'll go login, UFS ATS. So that can be useful in different situations. I wanted to point that out. So ATS login UFS. If I click on login, then now all the data over here refreshes, and it shows me all of the logins. So I can see here too that I can facet this, and I can see that for every one of those logins, all it says in that column is succeeded. So that makes me feel good that I can exclude all of those columns. I'm sorry, click on it. I think I'm undoing just what I did. So let me hit login and then remove all. We'll actually remove them. No, I didn't do what I was trying to do. So let me rewind. Do this again. Next facet. Login. Well, there's a couple different ways you can do this. I know one is I can star all the rows here. And then remove all matching rows. I want to get rid of all of them. Great. I only got rid of them all. There's another way to do that that's easier, but slipped my mind for a second. So now, this is showing me the two choices. I don't need that. You can tell it's been a while since I did this. Okay, reset all. So now I don't have anything chosen. So now I just have these UFS queries and these ATS queries. Ooh, okay. So I got login, and then under the succeeded, I can see the actual whatever they were searching for. All right. Going to what the next step I'm going to show. Chat screen. So I took out the login rows, removed the matching ones. Now, now I want to look and see if I want to try, as I'm looking at these values that are in the succeeded column, I can see that there's two general types. There's one where like this, the index that's being searched, general, a TI is title, shows up first, and then the words that somebody typed in are later. Then there's these other kind of queries that is a number, and then C key, which in the catalog, means it's looking for a particular record. Or I even get some that have this 022. But the main thing is that it's kind of two different ways of pulling out the text data. And maybe in my case, I want to get either this general or the C key as far as like a type of search, and then I want the other thing to be the value. So that looks like it's going to be kind of hard. And I'm not going to lie to you, it is going to be a little bit difficult. But you can, if you want to, is you can create a new column that's based on this column. And I have to remember where. Add column based on this column. So I'm going to make a new column. And I don't know, I'm going to call it something like index, something like that. Then this is going to get, what it's doing right here is I got a preview at the bottom that tells me whatever expression I put in here, it'll show me what it is. This is going to be very long. I don't expect you to like figure this out. And I'm not going to even pretend to know what it is. I have the text in front of me. It took me a long time to figure out what this would be. Good thing is you can Google this stuff. There's some useful documentation on it. Let's see. Basically, I'm using a function, I'm using an if, because I have either this is going to be on the beginning or the end, where these, I'm going to look for those brackets in some cases, or in other cases I'm going to use what the first word is. So this partition smart split is saying if there's a space, we'll take the first space. Don't remember what that is. Let's see. Then that. Hopefully this is going to work, because it's pretty tedious to do this in front of a bunch of people. Probably even more tedious to watch me do it, especially when you've got to use string characters. Let's see. So on this one, I'm looking for my curly brace. Looking for the first one. Then I'm looking for the closing curly brace. Whoa. It's looking like a programming language of some sort. Addition. Smart split is a pretty useful function. My main point here is that if I was smart, I would have just typed this out in advance. I would have copied and fixed it for your pleasure. Error. Oh man. Now I gotta troubleshoot it. Value split. Well, might be too much for me to try to troubleshoot it in real time here. So we're going to have to go back to my slide. So whenever I type that in, generally what will happen is I'll get general, or C key, or O22, or TI. So apologies, I couldn't get it to work right off the bat. But that's the nature of regular expressions. Just let it be known for your purposes that there is a regular expression that will be able to pull that out. All right. So then, once I have those values, I can look them up. I can do another facet, and I can see that a lot of these are the values that came out of it. One of them, you can see that something a little crazy happened here. This one called gener should probably be general. Easy to fix that kind of thing. I can go in, do the function, and say apply this to all identical cells. Let me see if I can demonstrate that. If I could at least get something out of it. But yeah. So if I were, let me just facet on this one. It's going to take it a while because a lot of these are just like completely different. So it came out in name, and then now I went to cluster. I'm going to look at it by count. These are a lot. Let's see. So I can see whenever I do count here, I can see many that were the same. And I can edit and apply it. That's what I was trying to do. So just for sake of demonstration, do that. So throws up. Because I have so much data. Edit cells. No, I don't want to try. There we go. I just click on edit. Okay. So let's just say for some reason I don't like the look of that. Let's say these quotation marks. Okay. So I took it out of there. One of the functions here is I can apply this to every other cell that has that same value. That's the main thing I wanted to demonstrate. I did that. Since I did that and I'm only looking at these, it is telling me that I edited those 12 cells, giving me the option to undo if I didn't like it. We're not seeing anything because we're only looking at that one right there. So there. So I have no matching rows. And it's so much data, I probably think it's something too big for us to do. So then, let me go back to here. This is weird. So I edited some data. Here's another one where I wanted to make a column called search terms. So if you thought that other one was complicated, this would have been complicated too. In this case, I was looking at all the ones that begin with AU, and I just pulled out the information there. So this one became a new column, Rosemary Reese, Gretchen Wheelock, and so on. Then I can do something that's kind of neat. That's where I can cluster and edit. So I have my authors there. And here, or what people were typing in. And of course, there's going to be a lot of variation in what people type in. So we've got Bruckner, Anthony Bruckner. Let's say I'm making a list. I want to know what were the top searched authors for that month of data that I'm looking at. So for my case, I don't care if it's Bruckner Anthony or Anthony Bruckner. I just want to know that they're all kind of the same. So when I do this cluster, and we're going to look at clustering in the next example, which is a lot simpler data set. I can cluster these together and make them the same. And then at the end of it, I can see what the top author searches were for the month. So Anthony Bruckner beat out Shakespeare. Here's some other authors. What am I doing here? I'm just showing that you can filter out any value that had the word "and" in it. Not so. Let's look at this other example, which is going to be a lot simpler, I hope. In this one, we're going to look at faceting data in certain selected fields. We're going to try to assess the percentages that conform to our schema. We're going to use edit and apply to edit these on the column level. So let me pull in this other data set. Here we go. So this would be a new project. And it's this one right here, Louisiana Music Resources Sheet Music Collection. And I've got to exit. Pull that over. Sorry about the screen all going on. Okay. So here in my sheet music collection, I've got 355 records. One thing I didn't point out before is that a neat thing you can do in OpenRefine is that it makes a distinction between rows and records. And so in this case, I have records that are similar, or it thinks is similar, and it broke them up. And it thinks they're the same record, but in our case, I don't think they actually are. So we'll look at them as rows. Oh, it says I already did something. Let's see. Oh, I know what it did. Is I opened one that I was already working. I'm going to create a new project. Okay. Okay. So this is one of those cases where it didn't correctly guess what sort of format my original data was in. It thought it was this line-based text file. It's actually tab delimited. So I'm going to go ahead and enter that there. And then I'm going to create this project. Give it a second. Okay, so now they show up. And then for some reason, those are records. I'm going to make them rows. The distinction there is, let's say, a lot of times when you're exporting, let's say, mark data or things with like multiple subject terms, sometimes you need to do something to them. If you put them in Excel, you're going to have like all of the subject terms all in the same cell because they're variable on how many subject terms you have. You might have one, or you might have 50. In Excel, if you broke them all out, you would have like column after column after column. Many of them would be empty in a lot of the records. Well, in OpenRefine, it can handle all those because it can recognize the difference between a record, which might have all of those subject terms in it, or a row, which would be, it would repeat the same information, but with the subject terms being different. So we're going to look at an example where we do something. So what I got here are some records that came from Content DM. It's came out as a spreadsheet. This is a music collection, so I have some columns that are arranger, medium, as in vocal original, medium notes, instrumentation, style, first line, things like that. I'm going to try to rush here because I realize I'm getting short on time. So one thing we can do is look at, we could look at faceting some of this data. I think a good one might be, one good one to look at would be this style. Faceting is really good whenever you have things that control vocabulary. So I'm going to do text facet, and right away I can see that there's something wrong with at least two of these records because it has a style of 336 PDF or 685. We're just going to ignore them for today. But what I'm wondering is I would like to break these up so that I get different lines for folk, I get different lines for classical, so I can get a good sort of, I just want to separate all these out. Because in Content DM, they put them all in there if you have more than one, and it separates them by semicolon. So one thing I can do is above the style. I can edit the cells. And I can split multi-value cells right there. Well, what's the separator that separates them? In my case, it's a semicolon. And then it's going to work its magic. Now, this is where it becomes clear what the difference between a record and a row is, because it changed this one that was previously it said folk, semicolon, sacred. Now they're separated, folk and sacred. Looked at them as records. Take a second. I'll see that this is one record, folk and sacred. Right now we're going to look at it as rows. Okay. But as soon as I did that, if you look at this, this refreshed on its own over here, you see that it broke them up into their little individual. So now I can see that there's 75 of them that had folk. That's pretty neat. Okay, let's say I want to look for some mistakes in here. I've already got one, that 336 and 685. That seems to be a sort of a data mistake. But let's look at, I think it was this one. I'm going to facet this one, a text facet, a medium. All right, and right away you can see I've got two here that look similar, vocal and instrumental. Then vocal and instrumental. For some reason it's seeing them as different. And if I hover over it, I can see what the problem is. That's that one right here has a space in it. You know, this kind of thing happens all the time in the real world. Some of these things you'll find they have a period at the end, they have a semicolon, who knows. In this case, it just had an extra space. Computers don't necessarily like that. I correct that one, and now I want to look at them all now. Again. Now that vocal and instrumental got grouped into that. So it's a neat way to be able to see all of your data at once, be able to pick out whatever mistakes you might be able to find. Okay, so I've only got a little bit of time left, so I'm going to go back to my presentation and talk about doing some linked data sort of thing. So here's a use case where we're going to cluster some data, and then we're going to add a thesaurus, like the EIAF. We're going to reconcile that to a thesaurus, and then apply it. So this is a similar data set. This is the composers, and we can use this clustering. Oh, I do want to show you the clustering in live. So let me bring this back up. Okay. So what is clustering? Let's look at a facet that will have some people's names in it. Close these other two. So right now I'm looking at a range here. So I've got a list of ranges here. I can sort them by count. I can click on this cluster. Right away, clustering is a neat sort of function in OpenRefine, and it runs these algorithms where it tries to figure out if two different values are similar to each other. These two are very similar. And I haven't quite picked out what the difference is. I'm going to assume it's an extra space somewhere. But using this method and this keying function, it was able to tell that these two are the same. Do I want to merge them? Do I want to make them into that value? It will pick the one that had the most. So I'll say, in this case, yes, let's merge it. Let's merge the selected, and then we'll cluster again and see if there's any others. Right now, I found no cluster. All right, well, that's all right. There might be other ones. There's different keying functions. I recommend just trying them all and seeing what you get. Or here we go. Here we found some craziness. Looks like Unicode's thrown some character problems here. Looks like I have one record here where the year did not show up. Maybe I want that one. This is the new cell value right here. This one, I don't care about these two because that was two people's names. Here's someone with two different birth years, same name. So obviously one of those is wrong, but I would have to go and look that up, figure out which one it was. Then here, it's like neither of these are exactly what I want. And I don't know if I'm going to know off the top of my head. But let's just say I wanted to remove those strange characters. Let's say that's what I wanted it to be. I can merge them. Merge the selected, recluster. And of course, I get those again. Let's try a different. When you try different ones, you'll find sort of different things. Let's try the other method. Yeah, that's the same one. I'm probably going to get the same one again. Again, I don't know which one to use there, so I'm not going to say it. So that's clustering right there. You can have a lot of fun with that. We're going to bring, okay, so there's the clustering. So here we're going to cluster some stuff because we're going to want that data to be consistent. One of the extensions I mentioned before was this RDF extension. This is just, it's really easy to install. You just put it into the folder and then restart the application. So what reconciliation does is it will look out to an external service and it will ask that service if it has a string that is similar to what is in your column. So for a ranger, I'm looking at the VIAF, which is the Virtual International Authority file. Say, do you have anybody in your file that matches the name that I have in mine? And it does. It does this kind of, it's a really neat process. The one thing is that once you start the process, and the reason I can't demonstrate it is that it can take up to 30 minutes or an hour or even longer for it to complete the process because it has to make these web calls automatically. So once you reconcile it, you can find the ones that seem to match, and you might be able to add a link to it. So let's say you've got all those matches to your external authority file. You might want to link it. So sometimes you might have the link in one column and you might have a value in another. You can export them. One quick little thing, you can export from OpenRefine in a lot of different sort of ways. This is all the ways, RDFs, Excel and HTML, tab and comma, of course, or save it just as another project, OpenRefine project. You can, this is just showing you how to export a project and then somebody else can import it. One good thing about it is that it also shows you the entire project history so that you can use the undo and redo sort of tab to work through something that somebody else did. Really neat feature. Then this is where I got ahead of myself before. This is where we have some URLs and values that we want to, in this case, we're going to put those two things back into a single column. So we'll combine them into a single row record. So that's how we would do that. Here again, folk music with that ID right there. Then we export it, and what we end up with is a spreadsheet with the link to the external authority file. Really neat stuff. All right, so somehow I got it all in under an hour. Apologize for fumbling through some of the live presentation, but that's the nature of live presentation. I'm keeping my eye on the chat right there, so we have about 5 minutes if anybody has any questions. In the meantime, I'll show some of the recommended reading. People who are from library land might be really interested in this ACRL, ALA article Jacqueline Bedoya posted about analyzing usage logs. That's kind of where I got my examples about the search log example. The original developer of Google Refine, which later became OpenRefine, was this guy, David Hoying. He's got a great tutorial there. And then there's a book about using OpenRefine. We have it here at LSU. It's an ebook, but it's widely available. You can get it through your local library using OpenRefine. Any questions? I went through a lot there, so maybe everyone's kind of in shock. Well, okay. Well, I don't see anything in the chat, so I guess we can wrap it up.
Mike, it was really great. I enjoyed it.
Okay.
I'm going to go play.
All right, great. Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and I'd say that's the main. I guess the main takeaway is just to show you that it's something. It's really scalable. You can start with simple things and then move on to more complex stuff as the need arises. One thing I found as I use it is things that I used to use Excel for, I'm now doing in OpenRefine because it's just so much faster. You can see all of your data, and it handles really large sets really nicely.
Mike, have you ever used it with like qualitative survey data?
Personally, I haven't, but I could see that would be something that could be useful. Yeah. As systems librarian, lately I've been doing more, things having to do with exporting and importing data from one form to another. I've done some stuff. One thing I should mention too, I actually had brought it up in order to mention, is that the latest, I'll show it on my screen right now, the latest version of MarcEdit actually has an OpenRefine data transfer function in it. So if you get the latest MarcEdit, which itself is a free tool, and that you've probably heard us systems librarians talk about if you ever export stuff from Symfony, you export MARC records, you can put it into MarcEdit. MarcEdit has a lot of useful functions for looking at and transforming data, but sometimes it might be easier to do these things in OpenRefine, so you can export your MARC records into a form that OpenRefine can use, and then do some stuff with it, and then import it back into MarcEdit. MarcEdit would then be able to turn it back into a MARC file, which you could load into your Symfony system. So that's a really neat thing. Right there. All right, everybody. Well, we've made it through a whole hour talking about OpenRefine. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Mike.